Hello, this is Daryl here, sending love as always. Thank you for tuning in. I just want to say if you like this interview, you can check our website for companion workbooks, action guides, tools, checklists, templates, and show notes with links for everything mentioned on the call. Just visit bestbusinesscoach.ca. That's best, B-E-S-T, businesscoach.ca. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Daryl Urbanski, and welcome to the Best Business Podcast. My mission is to help create 200 new multi-millionaire business owners. How? You'll do better when you know better. In my interviews, you'll hear from self-made millionaires, seven-figure business owners, authors, and world-class experts sharing how they did it so you can too without experiencing the same obstacles they did. Now, if you like this interview, please share it with a friend you think will benefit. They'll appreciate it, and I will as well. You can also connect with me on social media. Look for Daryl Urbanski, D-A-R-Y-L, Urban Ski, U-R-B-A-N-S-K-I, and add me so we can be friends. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy what I've prepared for you right here, right now. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daryl Urbanski, your host as always, and today we have our second interview with a very special guest. And if you like this, then after you'll definitely want to go back and listen to the first. Today, I'm talking with the man I have admired and followed for years. I'm about to go through his bio, but one of the things not mentioned is his list of who's who mentees and proteges owing a large part of their success to him. The man I'm talking about is the one, the only, the irreplaceable Glenn Livingston. Glenn is a PhD veteran psychologist from a family of 17 psychologists and a longtime CEO of a multi-million dollar consulting firm which has serviced several Fortune 500 clients in the food industry. You've probably seen his or his company's work, theories, and research in major periodicals like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Indiana Star-Ledger, the New York Daily News, American Demographics, or any of the other major media outlets available around the world, including big players such as ABC, WGN, UPN-TV, and CBS Radio. Disillusioned by what traditional psychology had to offer overweight and food-obsessed individuals, Dr. Livingston spent several decades researching the nature of binging and overeating via work with his own patients and a self-funded research program with more than 40,000 participants. Most importantly, however, was his own personal journey out of obesity and a food prison to a normal, healthy weight and a much more lighthearted relationship with food. Our habits and behavior are so critical to our success, they can make us or break us. So I've asked Glenn to come back on the show and join us today to talk about his project at neverbingeagain.com to discuss deeply ingrained habits, behavior, how to reprogram them and ourselves to get the results we want. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us. After years of watching your videos from back in your hyper-responsive marketing days and seeing you speak on stage and following you on social media and our previous couple of conversations, I always look forward to hearing your voice and opening my mind to you. How are you doing today, my friend? How are you?
Well, with that introduction, I couldn't say anything but great, right? I'm freaking out now.
Freaking out, man.
I'm going to live up to that.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Where is that guy? Yeah. No, I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to talking to you, and I hope that I can be helpful to your audience.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first interview you did is one of our top 20 most popular downloads after 100 and something hours of interviews. So obviously, you know, you walk your talk. People know, trust, and respect you. So that's not a concern of mine at all. But for some of the people, maybe this is the first time they ever heard your name. Maybe they don't really know your story at all. Did you always, how did you get into psychology? How did you marry it with business? What was your progression? How did you, from your early childhood age, did you have a lemonade stand? How did you even get into entrepreneurship and helping people?
People don't really know why they buy things all the time. And you can't get them to tell you even when they do know. And my wife had developed a set of techniques for indirectly interviewing people with some very game-like and creative exercises. She'd become really popular with a number of large companies. She'd have these very soulful interviews, which were attended by dozens of high-level executives every time that she did them. In graduate school, I had a lot of training in inferential statistics and predictive modeling. So I looked at what Sharon was doing and I said, this is easy. I can create a protocol that doesn't ask people directly, and yet I can still inferentially prove that this is actually true, and I could prove it statistically beyond a shadow of a doubt. That's how I got into marketing consulting originally. Was I started building those inferential models on the back end of what my wife was doing for big companies.
Got it.
Which doesn't have necessarily an awful lot to do with my journey in food and the techniques that I've developed for helping people to stop overeating and think like a permanently thin person. But that's the answer to the question that you asked.
Yeah, but no, I think in some ways it does, because I mean, and again, for people, like, go back and listen to the first interview for some of the more in-depth knowledge on that sort of stuff. But I mean, all right, you figure out how to make the wooey woo foo feely fuzzy stuff like empirical data that's infallible and statistically valid, without a shadow of a doubt, and then you use that to help generate literally millions of dollars and help to enter 17 plus markets at a profit. And then obviously you did the consulting, the hyper responsive marketing stuff, and you got into, helping people and having an impact on their lives. And I think, like you said, even before we started this call, that kind of the work you're doing now with binge eating is some of the most fulfilling work ever, because I think some of these people really suffer from that. And that's kind of something we can touch and talk on, because through all this, you found out that even though people want success, because, I do a lot of interviews, a lot of fantastic people, we give away a ton of great how-to info, but I know that there's people out there that they've got self-sabotaging behaviors and repeat patterns that they're stuck in, and they don't know how to get out of those. And so I think that's partially, at least from what I've seen just watching you, kind of the progression, the journey, where you figure out the model. I mean, you even got like the formula for like what is it? It's like, you put up your survey, and then 1 in 20 opt-ins will buy the product being offered, which is 5% conversion, and 10% of your survey participants will buy the product, and the cost of the survey times 10 is the cost per sale. You had a very strategic formula for that. But I think even still, you've noticed that trying to affect people and get change, even if they're empowered with the knowledge, doesn't always work. Is that correct?
It's a classic problem in philosophy and psychology. We all have that part of ourselves that makes aspirations, and then there's this other part of ourselves that sabotages it and usually goes for short-term gratification. When I was a kid, I would have been diagnosed with exercise bulimia. And what that means is I didn't like to stick my finger down my throat, but I purged by exercising. And the problem was that when I got older and I had more responsibilities, I still wanted to eat 6,000 calories a day, but I found it harder to make 2 or 3 hours to exercise. I started to gain weight, but more importantly, I found myself less than present with my patients, and I would feel guilty about it. And because I was a psychologist and because I was a statistical modeler, I attacked the problem from both of those angles to the greatest extent of my ability. I went to many of the best psychologists in New York. As you could imagine, I have a lot of good connections. I created an online study, and I paid to advertise until I had 40,000 participants, looking at the relationship between addiction preferences, personality, and emotional difficulties. I learned a lot of things in both of those endeavors. My mom was an army wife. She would keep chocolate around, and she would point me to it when I would cry. You could see why, well, when I feel lonely or sad or upset, that the first thing I would turn to would be chocolate. I thought then, okay, so what I need to do is work on feeling loved, and I won't want chocolate anymore. When I figured this out, it's like there was this little voice inside me that said, Glenn, your mama really did leave a hole inside you. And until you feel that hole, we can just binge on chocolate, right? What kind of clicked for me was that it's that voice. It's not the fact that my mama gave me chocolate instead of a hug when I needed them. What made the change in the behavior was figuring out how to fix that voice, because it was that crazy voice that rationalized and made it possible for the behavior to become manifest. It wasn't until I started working in that voice that I actually got better. So I'll pause for a second, because I've been talking a lot, in case you want to say something.
Fine. No. I mean, you're good. I'm very much engaged in what you're saying. I mean, maybe I do. I don't think I suffer from the binge eating, but I definitely resonate with the inner voice that the seeking a short-term game over what long-term is better off, and justifying it to yourself. That inner voice that you almost just allow it to win, and I don't really know why sometimes. And
well, so let's talk about that. Okay,
Sure.
in our culture. We've kind of emasculated our culture, right? And like if you look at the way the culture was developed before the Industrial Revolution, children were really property, and it was necessary to have a lot of them to work on the farm and do manual labor, and we didn't really focus on their individual needs and we weren't really as concerned about making sure they grew up empathically and became self-actualized and everything like that.
Right.
And so the pendulum had to swing as it was no longer necessary to, have children to work in the factories and or work on the farm and make sure that the family survived. And we really became a culture that focused more on individualism. And as psychology developed, that came into vogue more and more and more, which is a really good thing. But it really has culminated in every behavior being the result of not nurturing our inner wounded child enough, right? And the the addiction treatment industry says you can't really take responsibility, you can't really quit your addictions, you can only abstain from them one day at a time.
Right.
Progress, not perfection. And basically, we've become extraordinarily soft on maladaptive behaviors as a society. We're saying we have to nurture the person underneath them. Now, here's the problem with that. And Daryl, I'm a compassionate person, and
yeah, but it's okay. Let's drop the axe. Like, let's get real. Like, I'm yeah, you're good. I'm with you 100% because I travel the world. I see international things. I mean, the other day I was walking home and I passed this woman who's asleep on a cardboard box with her breast hanging out, feeding her baby infant beside her. And I'm listening to my friend on the phone who's complaining that their boss doesn't appreciate him enough and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, sorry, I just stopped to give some food and money to someone. What were you saying? Like, oh, they're there. I'm sure things will get better. And so I get it. Like, I'm very much with you in certain respects. So feel free.
So there's a physiological problem with this. And the problem is, if you ask a neurologist, they'll explain that the brain is really, you can broadly think of it in three parts. You can kind of think of the lower brain, the middle brain, and the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and then like the neocortex or the human brain that's developed later. And we live with all three inside of us. We tend to think of ourselves as the human beings who have goals and aspirations and seek to delay gratification and be persistent in pursuing our goals and be disciplined and organized and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But all of that is really in the neocortex. A level down from that is the mammalian brain, where a lot of our emotions are generated from, that cause us to experience feelings like love and camaraderie and organize into a tribe or a herd or a group. But below that is this lizard brain. And the lizard brain basically looks at things, when it sees something that's in an environment, all it's thinking is, do I kill it, do I eat it, or do I screw it? Right? Kill it, eat it, or screw it. And the problem is, in all of the addictive problems, the lizard brain gets activated and takes over. And so at the moment of impulse, when you're staring at that chocolate bar, when you're waiting on line at Starbucks and it's sitting up there, at the moment of impulse, your lizard brain, which is really wired for the most primitive survival, is overtaking the mammalian brain. It's overtaking the neocortex. So it's eliminating all of your best laid plans, all of your love and camaraderie and everything you really think of that as your soul. The lizard brain eats your soul and says, now it's time for chocolate. And so now you can see, when you look at that physiological structure that we're dealing with, why would you want to nurture that?
Right.
You need something, you need to cultivate a sense of disgust for the lizard brain so that you get a jolt every time that lizard brain tries to eat your soul. You need to be standing at Starbucks, and when you hear that lizard brain say, I think chocolate is a vegetable, you need to immediately be jolted back up into your right brain because you feel disgusted with what the lizard brain is doing.
Yep.
And so with that, I could tell you how I figured out how to do that.
Yeah, well, because I can definitely relate. I smoked for, I don't know why, but I thought smoking was cool when I was a kid. So I remember the first couple times I had a cigarette, it made me feel sick, and I like trained myself to get through that so I could smoke with my friends and be cool. And then when I smoked for 5 years, and then when I ended up wanting to quit, there was no middle ground. I had to go from being a smoker to hating, and I had visceral, like, disgust reactions to smoking, and that was the only way, and it was cold turkey, and I've never, and I walked away from it, and it's still to this day, like, I'm very disgusted with smoking and cigarettes, and that was the only way. I tried to quit a number of times. So you just really triggered me when you said that you have to cultivate a sense of disgust. That was the only way I was able to stop smoking, was that.
Yeah.
And it was based after I was volunteering at a grade 7 class, and we were doing this unit on smoking. I had to prepare for the teacher. I was going through all the research and stuff and the photos of things, and anyway, so that really resonates with me. So that's the lizard brain. Yeah, the lizard brain eats your soul. That is a powerful statement.
The lizard brain eats your soul.
That's so awesome.
And okay, so a step in the process that I kind of skipped over was my study of alternative addiction treatments. And I ran across a guy named Jack Trimpe at Rational Recovery, and he really focuses on drinking and other black and white addictions. He's done some work with food also. I'm not sure if he's quite on the mark with food as much as he is with all the black and white addictions. But with the black and white addictions, he's really codified the experience of people who quit on their own with a kind of angel versus devil on your shoulder technique, but really it's the internal structure of the brain, the higher brain versus the lower brain. And he had developed a technique for separating from the lower brain. He's another name for it. He trademarks it, so I don't use it on
That's fine.
on my things. And if you study his stuff, you will see how easy it is to separate from that lower brain and arrange to get that jolt. And so what I started doing was saying, okay, well, I can do this with food also. I just need to figure out how to make it black and white, because most people work with food guidelines rather than food rules. A food guideline is something like, I avoid chocolate 90% of the time, or I don't eat if I'm not hungry.
Right.
Those are guidelines because they're kind of squishy.
Right.
Did you avoid chocolate 90% of the time if you ate it all day on Saturday and Sunday and nothing else, and then you didn't have it for a month? Is that avoiding it 90% of the time? I don't know.
Right.
As opposed to, I will only ever have chocolate again on Saturdays and no more than 3 ounces in any calendar day. Right? That's a crystal clear rule, and you need crystal clear rules in order to hear the lizard brain. So at this point, I decided I was going to never have chocolate again, and that lower brain I was going to call my pig. And this doesn't sound very sophisticated for a psychologist like me, or someone of my stature, to have come up with this.
We're not. Yeah, that's fine. It's real. Focus on results. Don't worry about that. Keep going.
So I said, that's my pig. Anytime the pig says, I want chocolate, or you should have chocolate for whatever reason, that's pig squeal. Chocolate itself would be pig slop. Chocolate belongs in a pig's trough. I don't eat from pig's troughs. I don't listen to farm animals. I'll never have chocolate again, and I would just ignore the pig. And that's what I needed to arrange that jolt for myself. And what followed from there was a lot of experimentation with different forms of food rules, because what you need to do is simultaneously maximize freedom and control. It's kind of like being a city planner. You want to put in enough stop lines and stoplights and stop signs so that all the dangerous intersections are protected, but you don't want to put in even one more than you need because you're going to slow down traffic.
Right.
And it's kind of like that. You really want to maximize your freedom, but you don't want to allow the dangerous intersections to be unattended.
Right.
So there's a lot of experimentation with the different kinds of rules, and I came up with a structure eventually after I started working with clients where I said, well, there are things you never do, there are things you sometimes do, there are things you always do, and then there are things you do in an unrestricted way. And I find most people, when they have that basic guideline, they can begin to come up with a set of rules for them that defines, even though eating is a very complex behavior, it's not something you can quit like a black and white addiction. You got to take the tiger out of the cage and walk it around the block a few times a day.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I got that from OA, actually. But I find that people can relate to that structure. And Daryl, that's all I had to do. I mean, after 35, 40 years of, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on psychologists and going to OA and running that 40,000 person study, what actually worked for me was pig slop. Saying this pig slop, I don't eat pig slop and I don't listen to farm animals. And so I'll pause for a second because I get very excited about this, and I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I'm writing it down because the analogies are like, again, I think this is a great example. If anyone here, first of all, has a problem with eating and binge eating, I mean, obviously you need to go to neverbingeagain.com and get Glenn's book, or go find it on Amazon. But I think there's a ton of different ways to apply this, and I love it because I come from a martial arts background, which somewhat is a little bit more like suck it up, princess, and just get it done. And and it's kind of a catch-22 because at one part you do want to nurture the person, but and separate the person from the behavior. But at some point it's like, look, just do it. Like you know what I mean? Like just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just get it done. So I love how you created the what do we call that? We call that metamorphosis. I forget what we did when I just in my classes. We used to give people analogy. Is that where we used to call out fight, and when training we would call it either animals or superheroes or celebrities, and train like you're so and so, fight like reach in from grab, call your inner tiger. That whole you know what I mean, like superseding yourself. I don't know if that's the right word, but just because I love what you did is you separated it and you created almost like an avatar that you were kind of disgusted with.
Yes.
And then
not everybody calls it a pig, by the way. A lot of women call it their bitch. Some people call it their inner slacker.
Yeah.
As long as the dynamic is there and you understand that this is not something you're trying to love and engage with.
Yeah.
Then yeah.
Yeah, and you almost need an us versus them mentality. Like, this is me and this is some sort of parasite that I have to deal with that feeds off me, and I don't like it because of the problems that it solves in my life. And so, I have to make a stand, and every day is won or lost. In fact, we used to have, when I had my martial arts school, we had the rules, traits of a 3%er. The concept was from Jim Rohn, where he said that, who cites that there was a study and only 3% of Americans had a library card, but if you, before the internet and all that, if you had a problem, the only way to find the solution was your own formal training experience and knowledge, that of the people around you, and then libraries, because that was the human repository of all of our knowledge, collective knowledge as a species. And he's like, so only 3% of Americans had a library card, which means only 3% of people were even interested in accessing all the knowledge that's out there. Everyone else just wanted to suffer and live with their problems. So this whole concept of, do you belong with the 97% or the 3%? So we at my school had this traits of a 3%er poster, and one of them was every day is won or lost, where for some of these guys that were competing, every day you're not training, someone else is to kick your butt. So are you going to sit on the couch today? You know what I mean? Did you win today or did you lose today? And that constant kind of push. And although it kind of sounds more like progress. What did you say before?
I love that. I love that.
What? Every day is won or lost?
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole philosophy. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's just, and it's true. And that's that stern but loving parent where you need that. So I just love what you did, because you gave a face to the enemy. You separated yourself from that. You acknowledged it. You attached it to things that made you feel disgust, and that, like you said, it empowered you. And it wasn't like, my mom didn't hug me enough when I was a kid, all that. It was like, no, I'm a man now. Do you think maturity plays into that to a certain extent? Do you think it would be as easy for an 18, 19, 20-year-old to do that as someone who's, lived their life and gone through experiences and maybe a little bit more refined?
Well, I think that with maturity comes a progressively higher appreciation for the futility of pursuing the pleasure at the expense of your future.
Right.
So I do think it's a little harder for younger people to do that. However, it depends how much you want it. And I work with a lot of young women in particular who've really been beat down by binge eating, and they have a lot of success. So there's nothing that says a 5-year-old can't do this, but they have to want it. They have to really want it.
Right. Which kind of brings us to Think and Grow Rich, that burning desire, that want to accomplish something. So how will we, let's apply this to a different analogy, like it's binge eating, but someone's got an issue where, there's the project that they keep wanting to do and they never do it. They would create an avatar and almost like in their head of, am I being like am I being, I don't know, positive Pete, or am I being dumbass Dan? I don't know. I don't want to offend anyone that might be named Dan.
Well,
listening to the call, but
okay, so maybe you have a procrastination demon, right?
Okay.
And what behavior would you have to engage in on a daily basis in order to move the project forward?
We have to dedicate time, avoid distractions. I like Pomodoros. I'm a big fan of Pomodoros.
Okay. I like the Pomodoro because that's a very specific thing. One of the criteria I use to help people define their rules is if 10 people followed you around all day, would they agree whether you complied or didn't comply with your plan? And you want all 10 to be able to say. So if the rule was I will never procrastinate again, well, how would those 10 people know whether you were procrastinating or not? They don't really know.
Right.
But did you do, 5 Pomodoros? Daryl, do you want to see what a Pomodoro is for your audience?
Yeah. So Pomodoro is, I think he was an Italian guy who devised a system of productivity where it's 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of rest. And so you decide what the task is you're going to do. You set your timer. You totally shun the world. The world does not exist. The only thing that exists is you and that task. And even if you're just staring blankly at it, blinking, that's it. You've got 25 minutes to do that. And that's just and so when you plan your day, one of the best things to do is your number one priority. The only thing, if you only get this thing done today, the day was a success. The day was won, so to speak, not lost. And then you come up with a secondary and third priority. 5 is a lot, so try to stick to 3. And then you assign how many Pomodoros you're going to need to complete each task. And the thing is your whole 8-hour day is really just kind of like, I liken it to like CrossFit, or even martial arts, like doing rounds. Like sometimes you got to fight a guy, but man, that's you're wrestling a tiger, and and sometimes it can be tough. So you the whole 8-hour day is circling around this opponent, and then all right, hit the timer, in you go. 25 minutes, I'm going to wrestle this beast. 25 minutes is up. All right, 5 minutes, get some water, go for a walk, whatever, call someone, and then when you're up, sometimes 15-minute break, and then you go back in. And so that's essentially Pomodoro.
There you go. And what I like about that is every element of it is observable, right? Have you turned off your email? Have you turned off Facebook? Have you set the timer? Are you looking at the screen? Have you decided on the task? It's all observable. And so those 10 observers could check off a bunch of little boxes and say, yes, you did, or no, you didn't. So if I say I will always do 3 Pomodoros a day, no matter what, focus on this project, then any little voice you hear that says, well, you could go to that volleyball game, or be better to go to Dunkin' Donuts, or, how about that beer? That's your procrastination demon. And you can say, there's no reason to listen to it. I'm in control of my brain and where I put my attention, and I'm going to, focus on my Pomodoros. So it's that simple. Daryl, there's a couple of other pieces that interfere with people doing this successfully if I don't explain it. And by the way, when you go to Never Binge Again, go to the reader bonus section and sign up there. That's where you'll get a copy of the free book if you're electronically. You can get a Kindle or Nook or PDF. And what you also get there, besides food plan starter templates, are a whole bunch of coaching interviews recorded, so you can hear how the technique is actually implemented. We're talking about it very much in theory here, but to really get it, it's better if you listen to how the technique is implemented. Anyway, what the two things that stop people from using this type of trick of mind is their fear of being able to say, I'll never do this or I'll always do that. They feel like it's too rigid. And because it is too rigid, they're going to beat themselves up too much if they inevitably make a mistake. What I need to explain to people is that there's a different mindset that's required when you're setting out to accomplish a goal versus when you're analyzing a mistake and trying to reset yourself and get yourself back on track. Let's say your son is about 5 years old, and that little boy wanted to ride his bike to the top of a steep hill without stopping. What you wouldn't say to him is, Johnny, I don't think you should even try. You're probably not going to make it. Just do the best you can. The reason you wouldn't say that is because the whole time Johnny was pedalling up the hill, he'd be plagued by doubt and uncertainty. What you want to do for Johnny is give him the mindset that he's going to make it and have him visualize himself on the top of the hill victorious and get him all excited about what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like on the top of the hill. And tell him to concentrate on that and purge all the doubt and insecurity from his head. And then if he doesn't happen to make it, you don't say, well, you're really an idiot, Johnny. You would analyze what went wrong and you make a better plan to do it again. The purpose of guilt is to draw your attention to something briefly until you can correct it. It's neurotic to hold on to guilt beyond that. It's like if you touch the hot stove, you need to feel that pain for a minute so that you don't go touch the hot stove again, right? You don't want to say, oh my God, I feel so guilty. I touched the hot stove. I'm such an idiot. I'm going to go just hide in the closet for a week. I'm going to go torture myself. And it turns out that type of self-castigation is actually the pig's way of perpetuating your obsession with food, with the pig slop. And it's very difficult to binge if you're not yelling at yourself. And so, but if you understand that if you happen to make a mistake, you pay very careful attention because it could be a serious thing, but then you analyze what went wrong and let it go. By the same token, when you're setting out to make a commitment, you make it 100%. You don't say, for example, your wedding vow is not something like, I'm about 80% confident that I can be faithful forever, but there sure are a lot of attractive people out there.
Right.
And I'm just being realistic. You don't want me to be a liar, right?
Right.
That's not a wedding vow that you can get excited about. That's not a commitment that you'd accept from a mate.
Right.
And so why accept anything less for something as important as finishing that project or never having chocolate again? Why not say, I will never have chocolate again. That's the top of my hill. Why not say, I will always do 3 Pomodoros a day, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what. If you make a mistake, figure out why and try it again. And you'll find if you do this, that you've installed a kind of algorithm in your head that self-perpetuates. And it's not only the most current excuses that your pig or procrastination demon is bothering you with that this works against, but this algorithm starts to work against all the other things that it bothers you about and gets you uses to get you to break your best laid plans and commitments. So that's a critical piece, is not to be afraid of never, not to be afraid of the guilt. The other critical piece, this is with particular regards to food, but it's important to understand the forces that you're up against. So not only do we not want to nurture the lizard brain, we want to develop a sense of disgust with it, because we don't want to wake up the lizard brain because the lizard brain is not going to treat us well. But we're actually fighting a lot of societal forces that are supportive of our binging behavior. The food industry, they have a tremendous economic incentive to put the most calories in the smallest space for the least amount of money, make it look attractive and healthy with millions, sometimes billions of dollars of research into packaging and taste formulations, and then put another several billion dollars into programming us from a very early age to believe that this stuff is really good for us. I saw a study that said there were 5,000 messages, I think, aimed at children over the course of a year. And on television and radio, and not one of them is about fruit or vegetables.
Wow.
And so the enormity, right? So
Yep.
the enormity of the forces against us are unbelievable. However, if you have a crystal clear rule, and you can hear and you can stop that voice the moment that it pipes up, you're okay. But you're not going to hear that voice if you walk around blind to what's going on around you. You're not going to hear that voice if you're trying to nurture your inner wounded child. You're not going to hear that voice if you're frightened of manning up and making these rules, and you don't really understand the mindset to have when you make a commitment versus when you make a mistake, that it's possible, in fact necessary, to be perfectly committed even if you can't be perfect. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's about being committed to the journey and not throwing it all and not getting frustrated and giving up because you stubbed your toe on step 10, of a journey of 1,000 steps. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think that it's, knowing that, accepting that your life isn't going to change overnight, but that you can change, and that it's a commitment, and it's one foot left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. I love what you say, like permission to feel guilt and then let it pass. Use the guilt in a positive respect, or any negative feeling that you have, because if you don't, I just love the whole thing. So visualize the goal, feel excited about the goal, purge yourself of all doubt and insecurity of failure, and so that way you can fully commit to achieving it. And go for it. And if you were to not meet the goal, and then you feel that guilt, or and whatever you were afraid of feeling, to use it to look at what worked and what didn't work, learn from it, then let it go, and almost just go through the cycle again, and just to develop a sense of disgust with that negative, right? Like, don't get comfortable with the failure if you have it, but develop a sense of disgust with it, and just keep committed that you're on the journey, and it's okay if you mess up a couple of times, but it's about making meaningful progress in reasonable amounts of time.
Rock and roll.
Yeah.
You get it.
Yeah. No, I think that's really powerful. I think it's really, really powerful. Now, someone who's helped and affected literally thousands, probably tens of thousands of entrepreneurs, what do you feel are some of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs are making? We went from binge eating to procrastination. That's obviously, I guess, a pertinent one that comes out from your experience. What are some other things that people listening to this might want to apply this technique to? Binge eating, procrastination, what else?
Well, I would tell them not to apply it to drugs, alcohol, or cigarettes. I would tell them to go to work with Jack Shrimpy's work instead at Rational Recovery, because some of the modifications that I made will ruin the effectiveness for drugs or alcohol or something that's really black and white. This is for anything that has a complex behavioral economy where there are a multitude of decisions that you have to make every day. Adam, I have largely been working with people with binge eating, so I think you may have to throw me a curveball that I'm not doing so well with
Sure, no, that's fine.
at the moment.
That's fine.
I could talk about the mistakes that I see most entrepreneurs making, and maybe then you can tell me how it would apply. But
Sure. So
okay.
What were the biggest mistakes?
By far, I think the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make are vastly underestimating the time, work, resources, and morale that it takes to get something off the ground. I'm constantly barraged by people who are, and they don't like me because of this, because I'm kind of a harbinger of truth, but
Yeah.
I know that I'm saving them, a tremendous amount of pain. I lost $2 million by, jumping in, building this gigantic research facility with all the latest gadgets and 20,000 square feet, without really going through the research and talking to mentors and, all of the initial steps to really estimate what I was getting myself into. And, we also had 9/11 in New York to contend with, but still, I wish someone would have told me directly that I was dreaming, And I think most entrepreneurs are dreamers. And I think even experience, I talk to people running 7 and even 8-figure businesses who are prone to dreaming. And that this is why the most experienced entrepreneurs have all had their ass handed to them over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's just part of the process. It's just everything seems simpler than it's going to be. The drug of the new idea is so much more exciting, and it gets us into the lizard brain. It gets us into the lizard brain. So those are some of the biggest mistakes that I see people make. I think another mistake is wanting the market to want what you want them to want, as opposed to finding out what the market wants and giving it to them. I call that marketing narcissism. And the antidote to that is research. I think the third biggest mistake is that people put a lot of time into running spreadsheets that will calculate return on investment, and a lot of time into building marketing campaigns and a lot of time into studying marketing, but they don't really think through when it's going to happen and what they're going to do to get themselves there. And I think when is a question that really, it spoils the fantasy to a certain extent. But if you force yourself to think through, when are you going to break even? When are you going to make $3,000? When are you going to be able to pay yourself a payroll? And you really work backwards from that and do the math and get a lot of feedback from people who've been there about whether that's realistic. You don't wind up in this situation where you're running out of capital and you've got to scramble and you can't pursue your dream because you're out.
Yeah, no, I love it, because it's like beams of light of truth and experience, for sure. That is, yeah, no, I mean, those are definitely. It's funny because you mentioned that I have a client right now, and she's got a business doing. I mean, we're on track to nearly double it. She did 1.8 million last year. Around 150,000 a month. We had a goal of 200,000, stretch goal 252,000. 250,000. We finished last month at 252. This year we're on pace to do 272. And she's so enamored with this idea of starting a VA company to employ people from her home country, and I totally get it. And then there's another project where she wants to empower women around the world, and I love it and I support it 1,000. But at the same time, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to be successful in more than one thing at one time.
That's my disease.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just so funny because you're talking about like entrepreneurs, and I'm not. And it was just funny when you said that, because I'm as guilty too. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm all high and mighty. I'm definitely as guilty. But just when you said that, you're like, why even successful entrepreneurs have had their butts handed to them or their asses handed to them. I see that because it's the dreamer. It's I look at what even once you've been successful, look what I've created and manifested. Look what I've done and put together, and the results I've gotten, and I could do that for this, and you see it so clearly and nobody else can see it. So a lot of words of wisdom. Glenn, we're coming up to the end of the interview. I really appreciate just how candid you are, how open and honest and just forthcoming you've been with all the information. I think there's going to be a lot. I think if there's any binge eaters in the audience, they need to go to neverbingeagain.com. And even some people who are just curious about this, and I really appreciate that you made it.
It works for just plain overeating also. It's the binge eaters who are more motivated to do it. But if you feel like you eat beyond your own best judgment sometimes, and you like to get more of a handle on it, this can work too.
And I like that you made the differentiation that this is for, something where you have to take the tiger out and walk it around the block a couple times a day, as opposed to something like, meth.
Yeah, don't use it to quit meth.
Yeah, that would be bad. And for that, go to rational recovery. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that I should have asked you about?
I don't think there is, no.
No? What are some of the things you're most proud of that you've done in your professional career? I mean, this you said at the beginning of the call is something that's been the most meaningful and kind of endearing work, that's just the results and the changes you've impacted on people's lives. What are some of the other highlights? I'd just like to know.
The first time I sold a 7-figure project, I was terrified because I'd been doing low 6-figure projects and 5-figure projects. And I saw this opportunity when Bausch and Lomb was trying to unify their world positioning. And I said to Sharon, we could do this on a national scale. And she was terrified and I was terrified, but we stepped back and we analyzed the pieces and parts, and we said, well, this is just repeating what we're doing in 7 different countries, but there's nothing different. And we could do this. And we did it. And we ran all the way around the world, and I remember having to go to Tokyo and back for a 1-hour meeting in 36 hours when things were falling apart a little bit. But I was proud that I think whenever you're really going to take a leap as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to be terrified for a little bit. You're going to have to stretch the bounds of what you think you can do and stand up and say, yes, I'll be responsible, and then go back and crap your pants a little bit and figure out how to do it.
Right. What a great way to end the call. Glenn, again, thank you so much. Just your wisdom, your experience, your sincere desire to help others really shines through. I know you could be doing 101 other things right now, so I appreciate you coming on the call to share with my audience and I just really look forward to growing with you and watching your new project go and just getting older together. So thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. I'll have to have you on my podcast too.
You've reached the end of our interview. Now, first, let me thank you for listening. I appreciate and respect you more than you'll ever know. And now I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. First, what 3 lessons did you just learn? What 3 aha moments just jumped out at you? Second, what can you implement for yourself and your business in the next 24 hours? Third, what can you give to someone else to help you with, or give them to just do it for you? Whatever it is, remember, taking action is the secret sauce to results. Now, if you think this interview would be helpful for a friend, please give them a link to it. It'll help them and it'll help me too. I'd also like to invite you to help me find out more about the challenges you're facing, your dreams, your goals, and how I can help you overcome what's holding you back. We both do better when we know better, and your success is my success. So please reach out and interact. You can visit our website, bestbusinesscoach.ca for Canada or California, where I'm from and where I'm living. You're welcome to also try out one of our paid programs. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and pretty much every other social media channel you can think of. You should also subscribe to the podcast, and if you're enjoying them, please leave us a nice review. It really helps. That's all for now. Once again, thank you. Take care of yourself, and remember, the world needs the best business you can build. And I believe in you. You.